July 1944. The hedgerows of the bocage are a nightmare of green walls and hidden death. Sergeant Frank Miller sits in the commander's cupola of his M4 Sherman, Lucky Lady. His heart hammers against his ribs. Through the periscope, he sees the nightmare of every Allied tanker, the blocky, terrifying silhouette of a German Tiger I. On paper, Miller is already dead. This is the myth we have been told for 80 years, the paper tank. We are told the Sherman was a death trap, a Ronson that lit up the first time, every time. We are told it took 5 Shermans to destroy 1 Tiger because the American tanks were inferior junk. And looking at the stats, it makes sense. The Tiger has 100 millimeters of face-hardened steel. Its 88 millimeter KWK-36 gun can blow a hole through Miller's tank from 2 kilometers away. Miller's 75 millimeter gun? It might as well be a pea shooter against the Tiger's front plate. But statistics don't tell the whole story. History books list armor thickness and gun caliber, but they forget the most important weapon on the battlefield, the human voice. Inside the Tiger, the German commander, Oberleutnant Weber, is struggling. His tank is a mechanical marvel, but his situational awareness is zero. To coordinate with the 2 Panzer IVs on his flank, Weber has to pop his head out of the hatch, exposing himself to snipers, and frantically wave colorful flags to signal his platoon. The roar of the Maybach engine drowns out everything. He is a medieval knight in a modern war. He is powerful, but he is deaf, dumb, and blind. Inside Lucky Lady, the world is different. It is loud, it smells of cordite and sweat, but there is clarity. Miller doesn't open his hatch. He doesn't wave flags. He reaches for a small black box near his collar, the microphone of his SCR 508 radio. "Red 2, Red 3, Miller says, his voice calm and crystal clear in the headsets of his platoon. "Big Cat at 12 o'clock. I'm gonna pop smoke and draw his attention. You 2 flank right through the orchard. Hit him in the rear." There is no static, no tuning, just instant hive mind coordination. Weber in the Tiger sees Miller's tank and rotates his massive turret. He thinks he has won. He doesn't know that he is already dead. While he focuses on the distraction, 2 Shermans drift silently through the apple trees on his right. They don't need to see each other to move in unison. They are connected by an invisible wire of FM radio waves. Crack, crack. 2 75 millimeter armor-piercing shells slam into the thin rear armor of the Tiger's engine deck. The beast shudders and catches fire. Weber bails out, coughing in the smoke, wondering how the Americans moved so fast. He thought he was fighting 3 separate tanks. He didn't realize he was fighting a single, coordinated organism. The Sherman wasn't a paper tank. It was the first node in the modern Internet of war. Winter 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Inside the steel belly of a German Panther tank, the radio operator, Hans, is sweating despite the freezing cold. The battle is chaos. He spots an anti-tank gun on the ridge and needs to warn his platoon leader immediately. He presses his headset tight against his ears, straining to hear through the storm of static. Crackle, pop, hiss. The German radio system relies on amplitude modulation, AM. It is older technology, and it has a fatal flaw. It is sensitive to electrical interference. The massive Maybach engine, roaring just feet behind Hans, generates a magnetic field that the AM radio picks up as a rhythmic, deafening buzz. Every time a spark plug fires, it screams in his ear. Worse, the frequency is drifting. As the tank rumbles over rough terrain, the delicate vacuum tubes vibrate and the tuning slips. Hans has to take his hand off his machine gun to frantically twist a small knob, trying to find his commander's voice in the soup of white noise. He is blind, fighting his own equipment just to speak. 200 yards away, inside an American M4 Sherman, Corporal Red Stevens is living in a different century. The United States military had made a massive, expensive gamble before the war. They bet on a new, unproven technology called frequency modulation, FM. Invented by the American genius Edwin Armstrong, FM didn't care about spark plugs, lightning, or engine roar. It ignored the static entirely. But the real game changer sits on the face of Red's radio, a row of push buttons. This is the crystal revolution. Inside his SCR 508 radio set are precise quartz crystals, each one ground to vibrate at an exact, unchangeable frequency. There is no tuning knob, there is no drifting, there is no guessing. Baker 1 to Baker 6, Red says. He doesn't shout, he speaks in a conversational tone. Target identified, traversing right. The signal leaves his tank, cuts through the snow, the interference, and the engine noise, and arrives in his platoon leader's headset with the clarity of a telephone call. It is instant. While Hans in the Panther is still twisting his dial, desperate to reconnect with his unit, the American platoon has already coordinated, fired, and relocated. The Germans often called the American reaction speed Zauberei, magic. They couldn't understand how the Allies moved so fast. They didn't realize that while the Wehrmacht was fighting with the equivalent of a flickering candle, the Americans were fighting with a laser beam of sound. The battle wasn't just won by the gun, it was won by the quartz crystal.
The might of the German Panzer divisions was legendary, but by late 1944, a fatal silence had fallen over them. In the rolling hills of Lorraine, Lieutenant Weber commanded a platoon of 4 Panzer IVs. His tank, number 401, was a Befehlswagen, a command tank equipped with a powerful transmitter. But the other 3 tanks in his formation, they were deaf mutes. Due to shortages, they were equipped only with receivers. They could hear Weber, but they could not speak back. As the column crept through a heavy mist, the lead tank, commanded by a young Unteroffizier named Hans, spotted a glint of olive drab in the tree line. It was an ambush American. Hans screamed a warning into his headset. "Shermans, 3 o'clock, traversing!" But the microphone in front of his lips wasn't connected to anything. His tank had no transmitter. His warning died inside the steel hull. Desperate, Hans did what German doctrine required. He ordered his hatch thrown open. He grabbed a set of signal flags, bright yellow and red, and popped his head out of the cupola to visually signal Weber behind him. It was a suicide sentence. The moment Hans's head appeared above the armor, a hidden American sniper squeezed his trigger. The flags dropped from limp hands. Hans slumped back into the turret, dead before he hit the floor. The lead tank stopped dead, confused and leaderless. Weber, watching from behind, had no idea why his point man had stopped. He couldn't ask. He couldn't scream, report, and get an answer. He had to assume the worst. Frustrated, Weber opened his own hatch to wave the platoon forward. Crack! A burst of machine gun fire from the trees tore through Weber's shoulder. He fell back, bleeding. The German platoon was now paralyzed. The commanders were suppressed or dead, and the remaining crews were locked inside their steel boxes, cut off from the world. Across the field, the American Sherman platoon was a hive of chatter. "Fox 1, this is Fox 2. I see the leader popping his hatch, taking the shot. Good kill, 2. 3, move left. 4, suppress that ridge." Every American tank commander, from the sergeant to the private, had a transmitter. When their lieutenant was hit, the sergeant took over instantly over the airwaves. They didn't need to open hatches. They didn't need flags. They didn't need to die to communicate. The German Panzers were superior machines with thicker armor and bigger guns, but that day in Lorraine, they sat motionless in the mud, picked off one by one, because they were fighting a modern war with medieval methods. They were a headless snake, thrashing blindly in the grass, destroyed by an enemy they could not hear and could not speak to. The Deaf Division died in silence.
October 1944. The Siegfried Line. Hauptmann Kruger peered through his binoculars from the safety of a concrete pillbox. In the valley below, a single American Sherman tank sat motionless at the edge of the tree line. Its engine was off. Its turret was turned away. Kruger lowered his glasses and smiled. "One tank," he muttered to his sergeant. "They are lost. Prepare the anti-tank gun. Wait until they move." To the Germans, the Sherman looked vulnerable. It was a sitting duck, isolated from its platoon. Kruger believed he held all the cards. He had the high ground, the camouflage, and the element of surprise. He didn't know that the Sherman wasn't a tank anymore. It was a telephone booth to hell. Inside the steel hull of the Sherman, Lieutenant Miller wasn't looking at aiming sights. He was looking at a map. He held a microphone in his hand, his thumb hovering over the transmit button. He didn't need to fire his 75mm gun. He didn't need to risk revealing his position with a muzzle flash. "Fire mission," Miller said calmly into the handset. "Grid 884-229. Infantry and dug-in positions. Concentration. Time on target." Miles behind Miller, in a mud-soaked field, the request was received by the Fire Direction Center. This was the American superpower. Within seconds, men with slide rules and grease pencils calculated the flight time of shells from 12 different artillery batteries. They calculated the wind, the temperature, and the rotation of the Earth. The order went out to 144 guns. The furthest guns fired first. A few seconds later, the closer guns fired. The timing was calculated to the millisecond. Back in the pillbox, Kruger was still waiting for the Sherman to move. The valley was silent. There was no whistle of incoming shells, the usual shriek that gave soldiers 2 seconds to dive for cover. Then the sky simply ceased to exist. In a single heartbeat, 144 high-explosive shells landed on Kruger's position simultaneously. There was no build-up, there was no drum roll, there was just a sudden, instantaneous erasure of the entire grid square. The earth liquefied. The concrete pillbox was shattered, not by a lucky shot, but by a mathematical hammer blow delivered from 6 miles away. The shock waves snapped trees like matchsticks. The concussive force killed men before the shrapnel could touch them. When the smoke cleared, the valley was a moonscape. The Sherman tank down below hadn't moved an inch. It hadn't fired a single shot. Miller simply keyed his mic again. Target neutralized. End of mission. The Germans called it Feuerwalze, a roller of fire. They couldn't understand how the Americans did it. They died never knowing that the deadliest weapon on the battlefield wasn't the tank in front of them, but the radio inside it. The Sherman was playing God, and the radio was its lightning bolt.
Spring, 1945, the Rhineland. The German Tiger tank hidden in the barn was a masterpiece of steel. Its 88mm gun could slice through an American Sherman like a hot knife through butter. The commander, Oberleutnant Muller, watched the American column advancing down the road. He grinned. He was the hunter. They were the prey. He waited. When the lead Sherman crossed the bridge, Muller fired. Wham! The shell glanced off the Sherman's sloped turret. The American tank reversed frantically behind a stone wall. Muller ordered his driver to advance. He was going to finish the kill. He believed this was a duel of champions, tank against tank. He was wrong. He wasn't fighting a tank. He was fighting a network. Behind the stone wall, Sergeant Miller didn't look at his sights. He looked at his radio. He didn't panic. He simply changed the channel. Red Leader to Danny Boy, we have a cat in the barn at coordinates 44 north, requesting immediate air support. High above, a flight of P-47 Thunderbolts was loitering, waiting for a call. They heard Miller as clearly as if he were sitting in their cockpit. Copy that, Red Leader. Inbound. Muller's Tiger roared out of the barn, turning its massive turret toward the wall. He was seconds away from destroying the Sherman. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. The roar of the tank engine was drowned out by the scream of a 2,000-horsepower aircraft diving at 400 miles per hour. Muller looked up, but it was too late. The P-47 dropped two 500-pound bombs directly onto the Tiger. The explosion shattered the barn and turned the invincible German tank into a burning coffin. Miller keyed his mic one last time. Target scratched. Infantry, move up. The American column rolled past the burning wreck without stopping. The Germans had spent the war building better duelists, heavier armor, bigger guns. The Americans had built a better team. The Sherman wasn't just a vehicle, it was a node in a massive, interconnected web of violence. The radio had turned the chaos of war into a synchronized orchestra, and the German army, deaf and disjointed, never heard the music until it was too late.